All right, who's ready to check out some more Traxxas option parts? We are back with our TRX-4 Sport build-up project, and we are going to install some parts on the rear axle this time. We've already built up our front axle, and we're basically going to put a lot of the same parts on the rear axle. So, for example, we're going to go and put on the inner portal housings, the outer portal housings. We also have the portal housing mounts to go on the axle. We have the hardened ring gear, the machine hardened ring gear, and we have the chromoly shafts, which I really love for this axle assembly. Oh, and we also have the stainless steel screw kit that we've been installing in our truck as we've been going along. All right, I'm going to get everything set up, and we're going to start building up the axle with all these parts. I've got all the parts out of their packages, and it's time to move on to the stock axle. And basically, I'm just going to go ahead and tear this whole thing apart. Now, maybe you don't have to do that. Maybe you're just getting some portal housings for your kit. But this is still going to be a good video for you to follow along with, so you can see how some of the parts fit onto the axle. All right, I'm going to go tear this thing down, and we'll start off by installing the ring and pinion gear into the axle. The axle is all torn down, and my Makita driver along with my Traxxas tool bits made quick work of that. Now it's time to move on to installing the ring and pinion gear. So here is my optional ring and pinion gear. This is a nice machine cut, and it looks like it's hardened as well. Now they do have a bunch of different options for gears. Actually, not a bunch, but there's a couple different options for the gears. We went ahead and installed the overdrive into the front axle, and some people suggested maybe you should try underdriving the rear axle, so that is an option. I do actually have the underdrive gear unit, and I'm hoping that I'll get some testing in and give you my thoughts later on down the road of what works better versus for me, whether it's overdrive in the front or underdrive in the rear. But I just want to let you guys know about that option. And one more thing I just want to point out really quickly is when you do go and swap out gears, whether they're in the front or in the rear, make sure you keep the pairs that they're mated to. You don't want to go and install this pinion gear with the stock ring gear because they are a different tooth count. So just be aware of that. All right, so now I just have to go ahead. I'm going to slide the pinion right into the axle. That's pretty easy. Now I'm going to go ahead and swap out the ring gear. It's just 4 screws to take the stock gear off of the spool. And I'm going to actually go ahead and use the stainless steel screws to screw the new gear back on. Add a little bit of Loctite to those screws so they don't back out, and I'll drop it right back into the axle housing. I've got the new ring gear swapped over to the spool and installed with the stainless steel hardware, and when I put it back in, I filled it up with some Utter Butter grease from Cal RC, and now it's all bolted back together, ready to go. Next up, we're going to head and move on to the portal axle housing mounts, and these aluminum pieces here look really nice, really well machined, and they're just a tad bit heavier than the stock composite parts. The stock composite part actually works really well, but again, to customize your vehicle, you know, these parts are available to you, and they are available in a number of different colors. Just one thing to note about these, there is a left and a right, so make sure you put it on the right side, and I'm going to go ahead and install them on here with my stainless steel hardware. All right, so we've got our portal mounts on the axle. Those are looking really cool. Now it's time to move on to the portal housings themselves. And basically, I need to disassemble it because I'm going to use the bearings out of the inside and the lower axle shaft here. Pretty simple, just pull it apart with a 2mm hex driver and use a 1.5mm driver to get the wheel hex off. I am going to go ahead and install my aluminum wheel hexes that I have, make it look even better. But let me get this apart first. I've got all the bearings out, I've got the lower axle out with the gear, and now it's time to reinstall these parts into the new aluminum housings. And the inner housing does weigh just a little bit more than the stock housing. If you're looking to add a tiny bit of weight to your truck, brass is a bit better here, but you know, again, if you're building a cool custom truck, this is the way to go. These look pretty awesome. Really well machined parts on here. Now I'm going to start off by installing the bearing onto the chromoly axle shaft, because this needs to happen first before it goes into the housing itself. So we'll slide this in here, just like that, and then I'll move on to installing the bearings. Slip in the lower axle with the gear, add a little bit of grease if you need to. Then put the bearings in the outer housing case. And then slide the outer case onto the inner case, and you'll just button it up with your hardware. Our new portal housings went together nice and easily. Everything fits perfectly together as it should. Now it's just time to install it back on the axle. So slide it in, and you might have to rotate the gear a little bit just to align that axle. It slides right in just like that, and then install the screws to secure it. Now it's time to move on to the rear links. As I mentioned in an earlier video, I have the hollow pivot balls, the aluminum pivot balls to go into the links. So I'm going to go ahead and swap those out right now. I'm not going to bore you with all of the details on how to swap it out, because I did that in the last video when we built up the front axles. So check that video out. If you need any tips on how to install them, I'm going to go button this thing back up and show you what it looks like when it's all back together. The links are back on, the rear axle is back in, and I really can't wait to see this thing done. It is looking pretty awesome, and I want to drive it as well. I'm sure you guys want to see it drive too. But if you are interested in any of the parts you saw today or in any of the videos, I put links in the description below to those specific parts so you could check them out and see their current prices and part numbers and so on. So if you're like me and you can't wait to see this thing done, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notifications bell so you don't miss any more of the installation videos we're going to do. And of course, we'll see you back here soon for some more RC driver videos.